Hello, I'm Roy Jenkins. Welcome to All Things Considered. What zest life acquires when we allow ourselves to be filled by the love of God. Not my words, but those of Pope Francis. A papal tweet, to be precise, and I hope it's inspired you for the day. The Pontiff has more than 3.6 million followers on Twitter, with the number growing by the hour. He's clearly been persuaded of the value of digital technology, which is probably as well because it's everywhere. It's changed our lives and there can be no going back. It makes accessible vast amounts of information and opens up immense possibilities for bringing the world together, but also huge dangers of intrusion, bullying and control. Bane or blessing, then? I'm joined from a studio in Southampton by Mohammed Ansar. He has a popular blog called Answers on a Postcard. Get it? And is an avid tweeter with more than 20,000 followers. This is not a competition, but our second guest, Vicky Beeching, has about twice that number. She's a writer and theologian and researches internet ethics. She's in a London studio. And keeping me company in Llandaff is Gareth Edwards, Minister of the Blackwood Methodist Circuit and a former leader of the Anglican Cathedral in the virtual reality world, Second Life. Now then, Vicky, let's start with you. You use digital technology as an enthusiast. What is it that attracts you?
I think it's really exciting to look at where technology's headed and the way that it's shaping and changing society. So partly it's because I'm a geek. I love gadgets. I love the latest tech. But also I'm really interested in the way that sociologically we are evolving and moving forward in our ability to communicate with one another, to connect, and also to behave ethically. And I think my interest kind of expands to embrace all of that, how it's impacting us recreationally, the fun side of it, and also the deeper side. What's it doing to us as people? Okay,
Mohammed, what's the attraction for you?
I think the internet, and especially social networking, is an incredibly vibrant and exciting space. It's a free market of ideas. We can have critical thought. I mean, it's a space where revolutions are created and also put to bed, but it's also a place where people can have closer relationships in an increasingly and often very disconnected world. It's an area where people can find like-minded individuals, they can find common ground, and they can reach out. And especially from a political point of view, because political commentating is something I've very much been involved in over the last few years, it's a dimension in a space where we can have very direct discussions about some of the most important and pressing matters that we need to address today.
And Gareth?
I'm interested in communication and the opportunities for communication that social media provides to express one's views and to hear the views of others, to see what make different people tick. I'm a local Methodist minister, very much rooted in the local Welsh communities, but through social networking, through social media, I can have conversations with people from all across the world, and it's a great vibrancy.
So tell me exactly what you use, Gareth.
For many years I've been involved with online forms of church. One researcher, I think, has commented that I still hold the record for the greatest number of online participatory acts of worship by an ordained clergyman. I haunt chat rooms and forums. I enjoy sharing ideas on Facebook and hearing from Twitter.
And Mohammed?
I think I, like many people, probably was of a generation where we started off talking on forums, or more correctly, fora, I think.
We must be precise on this programme.
I don't want to be.
Come on.
I don't want to be a grammatical pedant, but having been to a grammar school, I should be shot down for not getting things right. I think, but fora developed quite quickly into Facebook. I spend a lot of time on Twitter now, and I think I started engaging on Twitter at a time when there were very few people, especially from the Muslim faith communities, and particularly in Britain, having a direct dialogue. And with so many myths and misconceptions about the Muslim community, and a near hysteria in some parts of our press and media and in society, I think there has been and continues to be a vital role to play in this almost online interfaith world.
And Vicky, how many different forms of things do you use?
Well, I first came to social media via MySpace, and I was very into that when I lived in the States. I was lucky enough to live in California when social media sort of exploded, and there was a lot of rumours that these tools were going to become huge. I'm not sure that we believed it at the time, but I was lucky enough to kind of taste some of that excitement in the early days when it was first being unveiled on the West Coast. I think since then I've really gravitated towards Twitter especially. I used to be very much into blogging, but I feel like Twitter for me has sort of eclipsed that.
Right. So you're an enthusiast, you're all enthusiasts, but Vicky, what's the downside for you?
Well, I want to look at the ethical implications of what these tools are bringing out in us. I don't think that technology in itself should ever be blamed. I think it's important that we see it as a tool, and a lot of my research brings that back to people's attention, that technology is a tool in our hands, just like fire, just like the wheel, just like the printing press, and we have to be very careful we don't damn the tool itself and kind of panic and say that it's ruining our lives. I do think there are negatives. Some of the ones I would quickly highlight would be that because life online is virtual, the consequences we face are less concrete. So we're less aware of our actions, what they're doing to the person on the other end. And I think having less concrete consequences can actually liberate us to behave in ways that we shouldn't.
And you've been on the receiving end of some of that.
I have, yes. I had a lot of nasty trolling back when I lived in the States, before police and authorities really knew what to do about online abuse, and I've experienced that again here in the UK, especially around the Women on Banknotes campaign that I was involved in with my friend Caroline Criado Perez. So, yeah, I mean, rape threats, death threats, lots of abuse, nastiness, and involving the authorities a couple of times, so not pleasant.
And how difficult was it to shake that off, or has it continued to be there in the background?
It's always there in the background, and I think it does feel quite unfair because Twitter for me really is a workspace. As a writer, as a researcher, as somebody working in media, I want the freedom to be able to go on there and do my work, and it feels a bit like being harassed in an office, to be honest. The abuse does continue, but I can't really stay away because being on there is part of my job.
Yeah. Mohammed, you've been on the receiving end as well. What's that been like? And has it led you to think, well, maybe I'm just going to get off this altogether?
It's a tricky one, and I think it's difficult to get the balance right because, as Vicky quite rightly says, it's for many of us working in the media world. I guess it's a journalistic, and it's a workspace, but it's also a space where people are not only working but they're socialising, and it's a community-wide space, and there are different communities who exist there. I think this idea that people are using this tool for what we sometimes call trolling, but this is where people are driven often by hate and prejudice of this thing which Edward Said called the other. And I think having this idea of the other, people create caricatures, and when they're sat behind the safety of a screen and from the comfort of their own keyboards in their own homes, suddenly they can create personas for themselves. And on the caricature that they create of the other, they start hanging very ugly and often ill-conceived ideas about what that person might be like, what their views might be like. I think Eric Schmidt, who's the executive chairman of Google, said that the internet is the first thing that humanity has built, that humanity doesn't understand. And I think, interestingly, he called it the largest experiment in anarchy we've ever had. So from my point of view, I've had to live in a space where, after Woolwich, I spoke out. I've always taken quite a strong stance against extremism, whether that's people like the English Defence League or whether that's this so-called Islamic extremism and terrorism around the world. Off the back of that, of course, I've been subject to death threats. And so the virtual world can cross over into the real world, where suddenly your family feel they can't coexist in this space with you. I mean, I could never in a million years have a conversation online comfortably with my children, for example, in Twitter, or my daughter-in-law, or anybody very close to me. And often...
Why not?
I think the amount of abuse they would receive from people who are looking to not only malign Muslims, but I've been an outspoken advocate against anti-Muslim prejudice and Islamophobia. And often, to use a footballing parlance, if you can't play the ball, you play the man. And so people are out specifically to smear and specifically to attack, often motivated by prejudice, hate, misconceptions, or just outright bigotry.
So you can get it from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I can be attacked by progressives for being too orthodox. I can also be a feminist and a misogynist at the same time. So it's a really weird space.
Yes. Gareth, we've heard a great deal about cyberbullying of young people and the dangers of young people accessing inappropriate content. I mean, and we know that some of this stuff can be highly manipulative. I mean, how realistic are your fears that the whole thing could spiral out of control?
I think there's always a great danger. I think somebody once said that if you want to be depressed about the human condition, then visit any internet chat room, because you get a great deal of very negative comments about people, mainly because of this anonymity, because people do behave so differently. Also, we have the sense that people can pursue an individual across various parts of the internet, can pursue a young person, and that can be dreadful.
How new is any of this, Vicky? Because you said earlier, I think, something about not blaming the tools. I mean, some people have always bullied, and some people have always been bullied, and the darkest aspects of human nature have always found ways of expressing themselves. Is this any more than the latest opportunity for that?
Exactly. That's one of the main things I speak a lot about, that this is not new. It's not actually creating these behaviours. It's simply amplifying them, amplifying the things that are already inside of us. If you look at some of the things that were written around the time of the invention of the printing press, literally you could basically kind of imagine they'd been said of today. Look at some of the things that were said around the invention of the radio and the invention of the television. There were widespread panics sweeping society, saying this is going to ruin us, that it's going to ruin our attention spans, our ability to have relationships, and especially there's always a panic towards the effects on young people and children. And we definitely see that at the moment with the internet. So I'm always quick to remind people that these things have been said before. The tools themselves aren't creating these behaviours, they're simply bringing them out. One caveat to that I would add is that the internet does have certain aspects that make being nasty, making morally bad choices easier. The aspect of anonymity can be something that enables us to feel like we can act without consequences, and also the speed of the internet is very different to anything we've had before, so we can actually impact people much faster. So I don't think the tool itself is to blame, but there are elements of it that perhaps are biased towards making it easier to behave badly.
If you've just joined us, you're listening to All Things Considered on BBC Radio Wales, and we're discussing digital technology, bane or blessing. Now, there's a huge amount of material out there online. How can we decide what is to be trusted and what not? I mean, whose business is it to teach discernment? Mohammed?
I think that's the great question to ask of ourselves now and for the future. The debate really is around anarchy versus regulation versus morality and ethics. I think we've seen, as it currently stands, a real evolution in how we use the social space. Within Europe, we've got the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, and Article 10.2 defines the role that freedom of expression and freedom of speech plays in society. What too many people tend to overlook is Article 10.2, which puts limits on that.
So is there, in your view, need for further legislation or for the application of whatever still exists? Is there already?
I think I would probably differ from my friend Vicky slightly in saying that I don't believe that Twitter or social media can be both the office space and the tool. I don't think you can be the PC and be the office. I think it's a social space, and social spaces, whether they're virtual or whether they are in the real world, the physical world, if you like, need to have codes of conduct, need to have codes of ethics, and need to have certain limits. Now, some of those limits we impose on ourselves, but if a conversation and certain behaviour wouldn't be allowable in a school or in a pub or in a mosque or church or library or even down the high street, I'm not sure it should be going on in the social space with social media.
So I totally agree with you. Just to jump in there, I do totally agree. I think those ethical principles have to be in place, and we can't treat it as though it's not real. It is real, isn't it? So
there might be ethical principles, but are you going to legislate for them?
Absolutely. I think there has to be the understanding that the online world is not pretend. And I think we have an interesting kind of linguistic reality when people speak about online and then the real world. And that can actually be misleading in the sense that it implies that what goes on the internet isn't real. So I'm really in favour of legislation and reminding people that actually if something's not appropriate in the street, it's not appropriate on social media. And we need test cases to continue, as they have been moving forwards, to prove that people will be prosecuted for online abuse, because it is abuse and it can actually have sometimes even more of a negative effect than if you were to abuse someone in the street. I know for me personally, receiving threats on the internet probably has been worse than if somebody said it to my face, because there is so much unknown about virtual communication. You don't actually know if that person really is outside your house waiting to get you, and it can play on your mind in a way that almost physical world communication can't.
What about the use of this technology to put across specifically religious messages? Now, we started by saying that the Pope has been tweeting. We know that you can get these things from evangelists and extremists of every hue. How can people be taught to discern what is worth listening to and what really should be ignored?
There is a wide variety of different paths and opinions that assail us whenever we log on. That is always going to be a problem. But I think people do get a grasp of what is right and what is wrong. I think it's a skill that develops over time. There's also a variety of different ways of exploring and challenging those ideas. And as long as a person is open and can explore all the different avenues, listen also to the critics as well as the proponents, then they come to some sort of understanding.
Mohammed, how useful a tool or how dangerous a tool is the new technology in terms of getting a religious message across which can have huge social repercussions?
I think there's a general debate to be had around what it means to be religiously educated in today's society. I think religious education generally, and then social media is a space or tool, however you want to define it, for having some of those discussions, those debates. I think that the nature of religious education today is vitally important. We live in a world where 5 of 7 billion people are believers in one form or another. We live in a time where I think people are looking for answers. They're looking for solutions to some of the social ills that we're suffering, whether that's around welfare cuts or reforms, whether that's what people perceive to be a lack of morality in society, a hardening of views. And I think religion has a really vital role to play in this contemporary dialogue. And it's important that people are able to have that discussion, to have that discourse, the moderation of that message, and ensuring that it stays within legal limits, I think is absolutely vital.
And Vicky, to what extent does any of this technology actually change perceptions to the point of actually making a person convert religiously to one faith or another? I mean, yes, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of propaganda. There are a lot of lines presented. But, how much, in your experience, does it actually change minds?
I think there's a great potential for it to change minds. That's one of the things I'm most excited about. And the Pope actually has referred to that in his World Communications Day speech this year, saying that the internet gives us an amazing opportunity to reach out to people that otherwise we wouldn't normally engage with. He compares it to the parable of the Good Samaritan and talks about the fact that we meet people from other walks of life. And he draws the point from it that we have the choice as we sort of walk along these digital roads, these digital pathways online. We can either ignore the people that are not like us in terms of the parable, we cross over to the other side of the road, we ignore the Samaritan, or we actually take the step and we move towards people who are not like us, and we learn from them and we have encounters with them. And that's really my vision for the internet, for social media, that instead of staying within our own silos and only hanging out online with those who think the same as us, we let it shape our mindset, we let it open us up to new ideas and possibly completely change our minds. I'm not a fan of digital evangelism. There's quite a lot of Christians who are pro using the internet almost solely as a technique for trying to convert people. I guess the equivalent would be knocking on people's doors in the physical world, showing up with leaflets and pamphlets and Bibles and things. And I think that approach is a little bit suspect. I think people can tell if you're online with one agenda. And I think the important thing is to be online just as a whole person, living a normal life, engaging with people, getting out of your comfort zone, talking about what matters to you, not trying to convert people, and also not trying to prevent yourself from being open to other ideas.
And Gareth, one of the criticisms often made is that people spend so much time watching their computers or looking at their smartphones or whatever, they don't meet real people. And yet you were promoting a virtual reality church, but you're not there now. Why?
Mainly because I've got so many other fingers in so many other pies.
Not because you don't believe in it anymore.
No, absolutely not. I'm passionate about the advantages of online church and building online communities.
Doesn't that mean that people actually stop meeting real human beings and they're just sitting in front of their devices? What
I found was that for most people, it was a way back into community, that they had felt marginalised or excluded, or just didn't have the courage to step over a doorway. And it's a way of, with less of a difficulty, going into a community, sharing ideas, finding out a bit about it, and becoming involved that way. And that may open the doors into reality as well. A lot of people who are involved with the online church communities I've been involved with also have difficulty with, for example, mobility. And it enables them to be fully involved with a community that they may have difficulty with.
Hold any attraction for you, Vicky?
I do think it opens up a lot of great possibilities for people who are, especially those who are housebound and who aren't able to physically get to a service. It can be absolutely brilliant. It can also be another opportunity to get outside of your comfort zone. So to attend a service of a denomination or even a religion that is not your own. But I do think as a sole church community, if you were only going to church online, I think I would have questions about that, because it ceases to actually have the physicality, which I think is very important. You're not going to be sharing the peace, shaking anyone's hand, or having to be around people that you don't want to be around. So the digital virtual church can be a little bit too protected.
Essentially a cop-out, Mohammed. You've got to meet real people.
I think I always prefer to sit down with somebody and have a cup of coffee and talk about things. I think face-to-face, I don't think there's any substitute for face-to-face. However, looking at the reality of how people live today, let's talk from the Muslim perspective for a second. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the country, widely reported to be, and generally in Europe, which is generally a white non-Muslim space, if you like, in the population. So if you are living, let's say, in rural Dorset, and you are looking for, spiritual answers, you find solace in the Islamic message, you convert to Islam, and then you look around and you think, well, there's no community here for me to connect with. There may be no local mosque. There may be no place to go and have my acts of worship, or to learn about things and connect with others. And I've not only, I hope, helped in some small way to guide people not only towards Islam, but to communities where they can engage. So I think we're seeing a blurring of lines, and the virtual space is one where people can tackle marginalisation and feeling alienated and isolated, and can find friends, and can go from having online chats to actually sitting down face to face and having a cup of coffee.
All three of you, very kindly switched your mobile phones, whatever devices you carry with you all the time, for the start of this discussion. I have to ask you, after half an hour, simple answer, yes or no, do you really feel disconnected? Are you itching to get back online? Mohammed?
I just tweeted Vicky about 2 minutes ago, so I
So
I can't. But saying that, Vicky did tweet a picture of herself as well, so I think fair's fair.
Some people have not been playing by the rules here, clearly.
No,
taking advantage of the fact that you're in different studios. So your itch has been well and truly scratched as the programme's gone on. Gareth?
I'm not someone who sends messages about all and sundry of what I do in a day. It doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. I'm quite happy to be isolated, but I do enjoy coming online and at times when I want to do it, or times when I can be available to others, and just interact.
Yeah, I would say for me, the online and offline world are actually not separate anymore. And I think for a lot of people, that dividing line has long gone. So I like to talk about what I'm doing as I'm doing it and involve other people. So even with this programme, I've been tweeting people asking for their reflections on the things we're talking about so that I can kind of reflect their views back in, and it influences what I say. So for me, being online while we talk about online things is very important.
Well, there we are. Social media, digital technology, bane or blessing. In a word, Vicky, bane or blessing?
Totally a blessing if we use it wisely.
Gareth?
Certainly a blessing.
Mohammed?
I think it's a blessing, but I think we need to be cautious about our use of it.
Mohammed Ansar, Vicky Beeching, Gareth Edwards, many thanks. You can hear this programme again or download the podcast, that's online, via our webpage at bbc.co.uk/Radio Wales. All things considered will be here at the same time next week, but meanwhile from me, Roy Jenkins, goodbye.